Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into how rebellious teens completely transformed our everyday wardrobes. We often think of fashion as this rigid thing dictated top-down by elite designers in Paris or Milan. But the truth is, fashion history is a living, breathing, repeating cycle. And honestly, it's frequently driven from the bottom up. We're going to look at how street-level subcultures sparked massive movements that are literally hanging in our closets right now. Seriously, take a quick look in your own closet right now at your favorite oversized hoodie, your most comfortable pair of worn-out jeans, or maybe a minimalist slip dress. Let's trace those everyday staples right back to their roots in fierce, uncompromising acts of teenage defiance. Okay, let's jump right in. Section 1. Birth of the Mod. Jazz, Soho, and sharp suits. So our story kicks off in post-war Britain, where a massive cultural shift was taking place. A new generation finally had some disposable income in their pockets from after-school jobs, and they used it to completely reject the repressed, class-obsessed culture of their parents. They became known as modernists. We're talking about stylish, young, working-class men in late 1950s London who stayed out all night at Soho clubs, totally fueled by modern jazz and a desperate desire to stand out. They shopped at these youth-oriented boutiques on Carnaby Street, channeling the smooth energy of visiting American jazz musicians, guys like Miles Davis, into a crisp, highly structured, and incredibly deliberate personal style. So what did this rebellion actually look like? Well, it was perfectly tailored. We're talking slim, tailor-made suits, cashmere jumpers, ultra-thin ties, and crisp Oxford shirts from classic brands like Brooks Brothers and Ben Sherman. But here's where it gets interesting. They added a highly practical twist. They would throw these bulky, utilitarian military parkas right over those pristine, expensive outfits. Why? Well, because you really can't look sharp if you get covered in street grease and grime while zipping around London on a Vespa. It was form completely serving function, but it ended up creating this undeniably iconic silhouette. Section 2. Mod women and rocker rivalries, mini skirts, and moral panics. Now, you gotta know this wasn't just a boys' club. Young women completely mirrored this rebellion by taking the traditional, highly restrictive 1950s housewife aesthetic and basically tossing it in the trash. Heavily influenced by instrumental designers like Mary Quant, women embraced clean lines and a whole lot of androgyny. They started wearing men's shirts, trousers, and these daringly loose mini shift dresses with hemlines hitting right at or even above the knee. Supermodels of the era like Twiggy absolutely epitomized this look, pairing it with those short, chin-length bob haircuts. It was youthful, it was free, and it was entirely disruptive. But of course, every good rebellion naturally sparks a counter-rebellion, right? The sharp-dressed, fashion-obsessed mods inevitably kicked off a highly publicized rivalry with another group, the rockers. These guys were leather-clad traditionalists who essentially viewed the style-conscious mods as a bit too effeminate. And this rivalry wasn't just about nasty looks. It led to actual physical street clashes in the mid-60s. In fact, these very clashes were so shocking to the public that they birthed the very first use of the sociological term moral panic. Think about that. That is how deeply these clothing choices shook society. Section 3. The 1990s Casual Rebellion, from Glamour to Grunge. Let's leap forward about 30 years to the 1990s. A completely different generation was staging a rebellion of their own. But this time, they weren't rejecting post-war austerity. No, they were reacting against the glossy, wholesome perfection and sheer excess of the 1980s. The script was completely flipped. The 80s ideal was represented by these larger-than-life, incredibly glamorous supermodels. Think Cindy Crawford and Naomi Campbell. But the youth of the 90s, they wanted something authentic, something raw. They traded that high glamour for a down-at-heel, fragile, and intentionally disheveled aesthetic that the media dubbed heroin chic, epitomized by models like Kate Moss. For the first time in a while, the clothes became the star, not the untouchable glamour of the person wearing them. And the decade moved at absolute breakneck speed. In the early 90s, heavily driven by Seattle grunge bands like Kurt Cobain's Nirvana, the look was all oversized flannel shirts, worn-out jeans, and heavy scuffed Doc Martens. It was the ultimate anti-fashion statement. But ironically, it was an anti-fashion statement that high-end designers scooped right up and threw onto international catwalks. By the mid-90s, the minimalist slip dress took over, often paired with just a plain white t-shirt, right alongside the sexy schoolgirl look. You'd see in movies like Clueless. And then finally, by the late 90s, the trend shifted again toward baggy, everyday utilitarian wear, khakis, cargo pants, and bohemian influences. The entire decade was basically a masterclass in dressing down. This casual wave even managed to hijack children's closets. 90s kids' fashion was heavily dictated by pop culture. Basically, whatever Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen were wearing in their latest straight-to-video movie, like overalls or baby doll dresses, instantly became a massive trend. On top of that, kids were practically living in clothes themed around the golden age of Disney animated films, alongside big, logo-heavy sportswear from brands like Champion and The Gap. So here's the absolute game changer: how this casual youth rebellion permanently altered everyday adult life. Fashion historians Amy DeLaHaye and Andrew Tucker actually note that jeans and sweatshirts became totally acceptable during the mid-90s in all but the most formal industries, as this concept of Friday wear began to sneak its influence throughout the rest of the week. Thanks in no small part to hip-hop artists like Wu-Tang Clan completely mainstreaming tracksuits and hoodies, this casual revolution entirely redefined the office. We permanently traded in our stiff suits for the Gap khakis and casual sweatshirts, and we really never looked back. Section 4. Pop Culture and Mod Revival. The cycle repeats. But here's the thing about fashion history. It absolutely refuses to sit still. The end of the 90s proved the ultimate fashion rule. What goes around truly comes around. That unkempt grunge look we just talked about, it eventually faced its own massive backlash. The 90s Britpop music movement violently rejected the disheveled thrift store aesthetic of grunge. Instead, they reached 30 years right back into the past, reviving the tailored, sharp-suited look of the original 1960s mods. Suddenly, the parkas, the slim fits, the crisp polo shorts, it all came roaring back to life. And you know what? That cycle hasn't stopped today. Modern musicians like Miles Kane and Alex Turner proudly carry that mod torch right now. They serve as walking, breathing proof of what we've been talking about today. Subcultures don't ever really die. They just sort of wait in the closet, gathering a little bit of dust, completely ready to be rediscovered and reinterpreted by the very next generation looking for a fresh way to stand out. So, as you look at the highly accelerated fashion trends sweeping around today, I want to leave you with this thought. As Y2K fashion comes storming back right now, which rebellious era of the past are we destined to wear tomorrow? Will we see a dramatic return to sharp, structured tailoring, or are we going to invent a completely new kind of casual? Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and hey, next time you throw on a pair of cargo pants or a slim suit, remember the rebels who wore them first.